aka Dan, to be with us tonight. Thanks, Laura. Got us off starting. Hi, I'm Cheri Hudson Passey, and welcome to GenFriends. I am the owner of Carolina Girl Genealogy, and with me tonight we've got Laura Hedgecock from Treasure Chest of Memories. I can't even think tonight. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Good that you're here. And Melissa Barker, the archive lady, is here from her archives.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here because we have a very special guest that luckily Laura was able to connect with and get her on the program tonight. And a lot of you may know Allison Peacock. She's been around the genealogy community for a while, and she's the founder of FHD Forensics. And what they do is they work with law enforcement, working on those cold cases out there that we hear about a lot. Public interest, historical investigations. She's also created the Family History Detectives podcast. So we'll put a link to that so you can find that and listen to her talk about the cases that she's working. She has done a lot in the media. You may have seen her on CNN, on Good Morning America. She collaborated with a Fox journalist for her work with What About Holly? So we're seeing her in all sorts of places with the good work that she's doing. And there's an upcoming episode of ABC's 2020 in the works. So girl, you're everywhere.
That's a secret.
Everywhere. You are everywhere. But I also love that you have founded the Genealogy for Justice, which is a fundraiser group to help solve cold cases. So, and I know that you recently just solved a South Carolina case, right?
Yeah, we did. Well, Virginia was actually from North Carolina, but died in South Carolina. So there's a Carolina connection on both sides. And yeah, it's really exciting.
Well, tell us how you got started. You say you started out just doing regular genealogy, and then how did you move into forensics genealogy?
Well, like most people that do this, I had things I was solving in my own family, and I decided there were things that I just couldn't find, traditionally. So I got into DNA. My I don't like the word ex, but my children's father, my former husband, was born in Mexico and was adopted. And so from the time we had our first child together in the 90s, we started talking about trying to find his family. So we did the old-fashioned thing and sent somebody to the civil registry in Mexico, and then got stuck after a few years and nothing happened. And so fast forward a few years later, when DNA came out, it was exactly what we were missing. And about that time, I also became obsessed with my South Carolina based ancestors, who among them, my grandfather's grandfather was the child of a single mom. And had a dad in the family. He carried his mother's last name. So, everybody in the family wanted to know, well, who was he? And so within about a 2 or 3 week period, I solved both of those cases, the mother and father of my ex-husband, as well as the father of my second great grandfather. And so it was, I was hooked, I guess. It's the perfect accompaniment to those old records that I still love digging through. I mean, that's the part that I love doing the most. I love reading the old documents and digging for old records, land records, wills, things like that. But in the old photos, I love all that stuff. But the DNA is the perfect tool to complement.
Oh, sure. And you need the paper trail along with the DNA to be able to connect these families. And so just wonderful work. And then it just moved along and you created your own company for this. So I think that's wonderful too. You created FHD Forensics, which, how did you decide that you wanted to do this and have your own company?
Well, so in 2021, at the beginning of 2021, I met a woman on Facebook who had a company that did this. And I had, my company at the time was called Family History Detectives. And I was working mostly with adopted people or people that had missing people in their family tree. I was doing a lot of DNA, but I knew I wanted to do forensic work. And I actually had a case where I was working with a black market adoption survivor from Brazil and was putting together a boots on the ground team to try to find records in Brazil to help solve this woman's identity. And I posted about it in a forensic genealogy group, said, who's got connections, who speaks Portuguese, who's got connections in Brazil. And Colleen Fitzpatrick,
Yes.
saw my post and said, I need somebody like you to kind of help operate my company. And so,
Wow.
because I had a business background, I had my own business already, and she
Sure.
also could see that I was ambitious in genealogy. And so we worked together for about a year. And so she basically kind of I packaged up my company and kind of leased it to her, I guess, in a way. It was my assistant and I both, who was my daughter, actually. So the two of us kind of operated her business for a while. And after a year, things changed. I was moving from Texas to New York and had just solved a couple of cases. And my father actually passed away. There were a lot of things going on in my life. It was time to just go back to my own company. And I decided Family History Detectives was not really the kind of company I wanted to put on a business card to go talk to law enforcement. So I became FHD Forensics. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
company had been around for a long time. I just kind of changed the name. So
How did the police department, how do they accept you? Because I hear stories sometimes that they're not quite that thrilled with forensics, people coming in talking about DNA. And I know it's gotten better because there's been so many cases that have been solved, but have you had any difficulties approaching the police?
No, I have not. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing more about these things you're hearing from people, because
Yeah.
for me, in our experience, and again, I've only been doing this about 3 years, but
Mhm.
I have yet, I mean, either somebody just doesn't call you back or
Yeah.
they do, obviously,
Yeah.
and there are so many people, there are a million unmatched CODIS profiles out there. So there are
Wow.
so many things to do. I don't really worry about the people that don't call us back. I just find the people that do,
There you go.
and it's like any business, there are some huge names out there that have been doing this longer than I have. But
Mhm.
when the small town sheriff that knows nothing about DNA, will sit and talk to me and ask questions, and I talk to him, and they got my name from somebody they trust. And, it's kind of there's just a chemistry that you have with people. Just like
Mhm.
certain detectives work better with each other,
Right. That
than
makes
other
sense.
detectives. So yeah, you just find the people that resonate with you, and the ones that call you back, or the ones that are super excited that I call and say, hey, I have my own funding. Can we please do this
Mhm.
dough case for you? And they're like, sure. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I have yet to really have anybody be rude to me or anything,
That's good.
so yeah, it's not a problem.
Yeah, that's good.
So
Good.
that's kind of my question is, how do you identify when you go to law enforcement and say, we want to help?
Hmm.
How do you identify what cases I mean, you have to know about them somehow. How do you identify what cases that you want to take on and which ones lend themselves the best to genetic genealogy?
So I always do, it's called an evidence assessment with new clients, and we look at what cases they have, what the shape of the DNA evidence is, how old it is, whether they were able to get an STR profile or a CODIS profile out of it first. Have they tried DNA yet? Has it failed or has it not? So I kind of, I've had people send me spreadsheets with 25 of their cases on it. And we go through and look at the
Wow.
notes and say,
Mhm.
okay, this one failed, at UNT. UNT has the Center for Human Identification. A lot of law enforcement send their samples there to get the CODIS profile generated. And if I see, it's failed a couple of times, or I just kind of, it's a judgment call, and then of course, if it's a case that we're funding, we're looking for a connection to just kind of that feeling like this is kind of one of our cases. Like, for instance, the lady that we identified on Mother's Day last month was from South Carolina and had schizophrenia and had died in a hospital. And the people that I was working with that were the surviving family members of a John and Jane Doe we identified in 2021 had a family member with schizophrenia. And so we all saw that and thought, wow, there's a connection, so
Mhm.
we chose her to be the first case that we did.
Mhm.
And then I also, in a very similar way, went to a Florida sheriff this past month and said, hey, we've got some funding. What doe cases do you have that need
Mhm.
identifying? And immediately found out about this little boy that would have been born the same year that Dean Klaus was born, grew up in the same area, was found in the same county where they were from. So it's pretty obvious, on a case like that, like, yes, we're going to take that one for sure, but it's just kind of, it's a combination of that and who comes along at the right time when we've got money and ask for it. And, it's just kind of a combination of things, I guess.
Walk me through a case. I know you can't give out too much details, but how does this get solved? How do you go from having an unknown person to connecting them with DNA? What are the steps that you use?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we've got to generate a DNA profile. So
Mm-hmm.
that means we've got to find a sample among what they have that we think is a rich source of DNA, and that's usually a tooth with a root attached. The roots are protected by the jaw. So if it's a 40 or 50 or 60-year-old case, especially someone that was buried for a long time, the fact that it's protected down in the jaw means that we can sometimes get DNA there. Sometimes it's a portion of the skull. Again, that's part of that evaluation process, is like, what condition was the body in? How long has it been buried, or has it been stored at the medical examiner's office? Those kind of things. So the first step is to extract DNA from the bone or tooth. And that we usually do with a paleo lab that specializes in ancient and really degraded DNA. And so we have a couple of those that we work with. If that step fails and we feel like we need to do it again, sometimes we'll do it 2 or 3 times and combine them together to get enough DNA to then sequence. So sometimes, I've got to call them back and say, well, we got a little bit, we didn't get enough, we need you to send us another sample. And actually on one case that's failed twice now that we just will not give up on, they ended up sending 8 samples, I think, to the lab this next time. It was just like I kept getting receipts and receipts. When they showed up, they gave us like every little, well, we got a tooth, and then we got a vertebrae, and then we got this, and I just kept getting receipts. But it had failed twice, and the medical examiner was not going to take any chances this time, so he sent like 8 samples. So after the extraction and combining, getting enough DNA from an extraction to then send it to whole genome sequencing, which is basically, in a rudimentary way to describe it, it's like faking an ancestry DNA test, basically. It gives us the entire genome, millions of SNPs, and then that data is worked by an engineer in something called bioinformatics, where they take the massive amount of data and put it into like a fake ancestry data kit. And then we upload and start researching.
See who matches. Is that what you mean? See if you can find people that match. So are you matching? Because when we think, a lot of us, when we think of DNA, we're thinking of autosomal DNA, we're thinking of Y DNA, we're thinking of mtDNA. Is that a part of this, or is it it's a different process where you're pulling all this out?
It's autosomal DNA.
Okay.
90% of the time it's autosomal DNA. And the only time we ever do mitochondrial or Y DNA is if there is just some additional information we need. I don't use Y DNA very, very often. I will use mitochondrial DNA on a really old case. If it's more than 100 years old, then you can't get autosomal DNA. Right. The connections degrade too fast. So mitochondrial is useful in that, because that, no matter how old a sample is, you're going to get mitochondrial DNA. Right. So yeah. But 99.9% of the time we're working with autosomal.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay. I got a little thing that said my internet was unstable. That's what stopped me. I'm a true crime junkie, and I listen to some of these podcasts, and on one of them, which is STS, which is Surviving the Survivor, they had Barbara Ann Venator on, and she was talking about the use of genetic genealogy in current law enforcement cases, and the fact, where they're limited because there's only a few databases where law enforcement is allowed. So I was wondering with these,
there's 2.
There's DEDCOM, FTDNA, and I thought she had said one other place. But anyway, what my question was is, when you get the Jane or John Does, do they have to be victims of a violent crime, or sometimes they're just people that are unidentified that may not, are you always bound to go the law enforcement route, or some of them simply just unidentified people that you're looking to give a resting place?
Well, there's still law enforcement cases because a medical examiner that works for a state agency has to have, the remains. So they're all considered law enforcement cases. The access is a little different. Like on GEDmatch, if it's a Doe case, they let us see all the matches. If it's a criminal case, we only see people that are opted in. So, but still, we can only use, because we don't have any way to upload DNA to Ancestry or to MyHeritage or any of those places or 23andMe. They don't allow uploads. So,
Right.
There is no way to use their database. Now, the only way I occasionally use Ancestry, like if we're working on a historical case, like we have a case right now that's about 140 years old, young man that was found in South Carolina in the marshes after a hurricane. Yeah. And we're using Ancestry DNA to test like the community. We're doing dozens of DNA tests in that community to try to find people that match him. And then we still have to go take their Ancestry data and run it through GEDmatch. But by having some of those people that do match him in Ancestry, we're able to kind of find other people that match and reach out to them. And we see that you have this family in common. Would you be interested in joining our project? But that's a very unusual case because it's a historical archaeological case and it's not being done through law enforcement. And so, but they are considered law enforcement cases, whether it's a Doe or a homicide or an assault.
That's interesting to know. Melissa, do you have a question?
Oh, well, like I mentioned before we came on, I'm like the non-DNA person, but it fascinates me because I watch a lot of shows about archaeology. In my next life, I want to be an archaeologist. And so, and a lot about, ancient Egypt and mummies and things like that. So that's pretty cool. And so this, it's really cool. And I really like the idea that we've come far enough now that we can identify individuals or we can solve these cold cases and give the family members that have been waiting for a long, long, long time for closure. And so I imagine that when you have that happen, how do you feel? Or, when you have that success, I imagine that probably feels pretty good.
It does. And it's why the people that do this do it. I think most people, I can only speak for myself, but I know most of the people that work for me, that it's kind of why we do it. It's bringing closure to somebody. It's literally answering a prayer that people have had sometimes for decades. And I guess I see it as a sacred duty. I mean, to me, it's something I'll never take for granted. And it is a big part of why we do what we do. It's, honestly, it's why we put up with how hard it is sometimes and the dramas in this industry and, criticism from other people and just all of that, but none of it can take away the feeling that you get when someone says, I've cried on Mother's Day for 42 years and today you bring me back my mother.
Yeah.
Who's gonna not want to do that every day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of doing that every day, if somebody's interested in doing what you're doing, what do you recommend? What schooling, what do they need to do? What kind of training do they need to have?
There 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said, well, go do some adoption work because there was literally no training. There are some trainings now. I think you have to find the program that fits you and your needs and learn it however you learn it. There are several places I think that have good programs, but there is no replacement for doing it. There is no replacement for joining one of the Facebook groups and volunteering as a search angel and helping adopted people find birth parents, or, you want to do a couple of dozen cases for free and see how you do. And then have somebody maybe that does this work, analyze your results, analyze, the sourcing on your trees and the way you analyze the matches and how you group the matches. And, that's really the way we all learned to do it before the schooling came along. So,
wow. Yeah. So maybe find a mentor, somebody who would help you to be able to and find out if this is really what you want to do. And I think a lot of times we go into something, we started, and we're not quite sure if we want to continue on. So it's a good way to, do those pro bono cases, work a little bit, and see if that's something that you enjoy doing. So I think that's it's a great advice.
I find it interesting that the way you just described how someone could get to know how to do this. It's kind of along the same lines as when someone asked me about being a professional genealogist.
Right.
There's courses out there. There are things out there. Other than ProGen, I really haven't. All mine is from doing the work for 33 years, and so that's what I encourage people to do. But when Cheri introduced you, she mentioned something. What did you say? Something about a Natalie, or what was it? When you introduced it to her, you were talking about some kind of program she did, or some kind of something.
Well, she's got her. Let me see. What did I say? What about Holly?
What about Holly?
Holly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that?
Yes.
Okay. So in 2021, one of the last cases I did when my daughter and I were still working for Identifunders was a male and female couple that were found in Texas. And I had a teammate that did the male and I did the female. And they turned out to be a young married couple from Florida. Their names were Dean and Tina Klaus. And when I was on the phone with Debbie, this was one of those cases where we got it through the Forensic Association for the county in Harris County, Texas, which is Houston, but there was no law enforcement actual involvement. There was nobody to help us with the case. The detective said that used to run the cold case unit had it shut down for budget purposes by the governor of Texas. Excuse me. And so I said, we think we've identified this guy, would you like to call him? And here's what I need you to ask him. And he was like, Allison, I have 500 open murder cases. Just call him and let us know what you find out. And so thankfully I had trauma-informed communications training. And so, it didn't daunt me to do that. But so when I called and talked to this woman, her name is Debbie Brooks, and I talked to her in Florida, and I said, I'm working with law enforcement on a missing persons investigation. And do you happen to have a family member that would have been missing for a really long time? And she immediately said, my brother, Dean. She told me his name, and she said, we haven't seen him for 40 years. They just disappeared, and we've not been able to find him or hear anything about him. And somebody told us they joined a cult. And by the way, did you find his wife and his baby? And I went, what? I said, well, yes, he was found with a female. And I had narrowed the female down to a family of 12 children. I knew that I had her grandparents, but there were some states involved in some of those 12 children that I didn't have all their marriages and birth certificates. And so I was desperately calling all the people that I knew were first cousins to this woman to see if I could figure her out. Anyway, long story short is when I talked to Debbie and she said, where's their baby? And I was like, she said they had a 1-year-old daughter. Was she found with them? And I said, no, there were only 2 bodies, 2 adults. And so, it's not something you can just walk away from. And so I told the detective, and he said, well, what are your plans for finding the daughter? And I was like, my plans. Long story short, we found her 8 months later, and she is the one that's doing the 2020 episode. She's writing a book. She's a wonderful young woman. She was, in her 40s when they walked in on her at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress and said, do you know about your parents? And she said, well, I've been looking for them all my life. I was adopted. And they gave her a picture of them. And that night she got on a Zoom meeting and met 25 family members.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. Amazing.
So she met 25 biological family members and
grandmother, 7 aunts and uncles, a gazillion cousins, including a double first cousin. So Dean and Tina's siblings married each other. And so she had this cousin that was, matched her on both sides. And we worked with NCMEC to create a portrait of her. And that was pretty cool, which it looks somewhat like her, once they found her. And so.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to read her book.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Well, I have a question about the Genealogy for Justice. And at the beginning, when you were walking us through like how you obtain the DNA profile, et cetera, and you're sending to lab versus and lab and lab and lab, what is the cost range of just doing these kinds of lab work before you get on the ground with doing, building up the trees and down the trees, et cetera? And is that generally the limitation that most law enforcement departments have, is just the funding to do all this?
Some of them do, and some of them don't. A lot of times we do work a lot with smaller jurisdictions, that maybe this is the first time they've done it and they don't know they need to budget for it. But then, again, in a place like Philadelphia where they've got 60, bodies in their morgue, they know to put aside the funding. I think it just depends on the jurisdiction. But a lot of agencies don't have it, or if they do, they're, wrestling with like what case to put it on, so and I would say that the costs run from anywhere from about $4,000 or $5,000 up to like $8,000 or $9,000, depending on exactly what all has to be done, how many extractions have to be done, how much sequencing has to be done to get a good, robust profile.
Okay. And I imagine too, like it would depend on whether there would be a statute of limitations coming up on the whatever crime it was too, whether they want to be.
Well, there is no statute of limitations on murder, which is why you
Right.
hear, 40 and 50-year-old cases being solved. Also, I have not met a medical examiner yet this one wanting to give up on identifying a body that has no identity either, no matter how old it is. So
that is very encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, with Laura leading us into that, tell us about your attempt to have people help through donations to be able to help with these cold cases. You've started a fund that people can donate to.
Yeah, well, a lot of it grew out of the search for Holly, actually.
Yeah.
So we set up a little DNA fund because when the story went national about Holly being missing, there were these people that through the media or through our website or through the journalists they saw on TV, these women coming forward saying, well, I was dropped off in Florida, as a baby, and I had this thing or that thing. And they all had stories that for some reason had some little hook. And so I was like, I can't afford to DNA test all these women. So I said, hey, let's just put up a GoFundMe and see if anybody donates to it, And of course, the story was really hot at the time. And so we got a few $1,000s in donations. We actually had one guy from Chicago call us and say, I want to help you with your work, and wrote us $1,000 check. And, just those things happen when we have stories in the media. And so we started the DNA fund. We had a little bit left when we found Holly. In fact, it was the fact that I was about to test one more person, and I called the detective I was working with, and he said, well, I can't really say anything, but I don't think I'd spend any more money on DNA tests. Okay. So we had a
little subtle hint, right?
Exactly. And so
can't say anything, but yeah, he said a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't tell you because of a gag order. I was like, okay. Gag order is kind of a big hint.
Yeah.
So long story short is when we found Holly, I immediately thought, I don't want to have something named after a living person out there. We called it the Hope for Holly DNA Project. And I said, went to the family. I said, what do y'all think about renaming this for Dean and Tina? And so about that time, we had European media that was, coercing them to do interviews, and we was willing to get out their checkbooks. And so they said, well, why don't we take this money we're being paid and we'll put it into this fund, and maybe we can get enough to help somebody else and do another case. And so, yeah, that's how it was started. And we quickly discovered that to manage a charitable fund, you need a charitable organization. So, my business was not set up to be a nonprofit. I've been a consultant for 35 years. Before this, I had a communications business, and I know how to run that kind of business.
Yeah.
I had nonprofits as clients, but when it came to getting a board and doing all that, it was really clear that we needed to have a separate organization. So thank goodness I had a daughter that wanted to get into that and had long wanted to she's one of the children of the husband I told you about, born in Mexico. So she had just gotten her master's, wanted to help. So we started Genealogy for Justice, and that's kind of her thing. And I do the forensic thing, and she helps manage the funding. And that's how it got started. And actually, Laura wrote me one day on Facebook and said, have you ever thought about working with an author to raise money for genealogy? And I thought, well, no, but tell me more. Started telling me about this contest.
Laura's brilliant.
I know. I was like, oh man, I'm going to write Nathan right away.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
love Nathan Goodwin's books.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
Even you think doing this all day, you wouldn't read about genealogy at night, but I do.
Yeah.
And,
you did, and this is a total aside, but do you read the ones in the US where there's a woman in your shoes? Well,
I have to say, I read about half of the first one and I had to stop. I like Morton. I like to go back to Morton. The other one, it's too hard to read about stuff that does not fit my life and have it be too different. Morton's Morton, and I don't pretend to be, Morton, but no, the other ones, I will read them, and I hope Nathan doesn't watch this, but
he will. No,
I know he will. No,
we've had him on a couple of times, so
yeah, I love his stuff. It's a little too close to home.
Too close to home.
I'd rather escape into the old world of Morton.
Yes. Yeah. Completely understandable. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
And show this fundraiser that you've got going?
Yeah, let me do that. Let's see. So here we go. Without further ado, how do I get all this stuff out of the way? Can y'all see?
Yeah.
Okay. So here is our fundraiser. So Genealogy for Justice uses a platform called Give Butter. I don't know who came up with that name, but it's a fantastic platform. It allows us to do all kinds of different fundraisers and live events, and we can have a page for each case, and people can look through the cases that we're doing and see what they want to donate to. And so we have this contest now for another week that we're doing with Nathan, and he has just been so wonderful and so fabulous. And so what he's done is he's let us, this is going to be a contest for people that want to name the villain in his next book, or to have part of their pedigree show up in the book. So there's three levels of winning, and then he's also going to give away some signed books. So
wait, so how do you get the first? Is it just by the amount of the donation?
Yes. The largest donation gets to, and it can either be your largest donation or the amount of money you raise, because we allow people to have their own page. And we have somebody here that started a page, and then I think she had to go have shoulder surgery, so she's not been able to do it. But you can just click on this fundraise button, and it'll give you your own page, and the total still goes into his campaign, but it's assigned to you, so that if you want to say share it yourself and go, among friends and family and raise money to try to get the prize, you can. Or, so far we have a donation of a few $100s. I think that's the highest one. So, and then second place is the pedigree. And then third place is to name a character in the Morton Ferrier book. So.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and then everybody that donates $10 or more that doesn't win another prize gets to be a part of the drawing for he's going to give away 5 signed books. So
fun. What a great way to raise money to help you solve these.
It's
cases.
a great idea. It's a great idea. And,
and this one is not going to a specific case. It's just raising money for the next time you need the money for a case. Right.
It all goes into the memorial fund. So yeah.
Good job, Laura. Good idea. That's a perfect idea. Yeah. It's just wonderful.
I listen to my fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this is wonderful. Is there anything, you guys, other questions you might want to ask? I am very fascinated, I guess is a good word, about all the DNA. I mean, I do some basic DNA, but I watch what you guys do, and I'm in awe that you can take that DNA and recreate a family tree and discover who a person is. Now, do you do the things that we see on TV where you find somebody that you think it might be and go get their cup, get their
I
cup?
don't, but, oh yes, that's what the detectives do. We give them, we give them a name, and we say it's one of these two brothers or three brothers, and maybe they have to go find all three of them. And but yeah, that's I've had a detective follow somebody from North Carolina down to Mexico to visit his family and wait for him to put a water bottle on the side of the road when he passes through customs, or border patrol things. So, I mean, I've had detectives do just, all kinds of things,
but the key word there is the detectives are doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys know we are not detectives. No, that's, no, not us. Thank you.
So you let them do it, right? Exactly. That's their job.
Really, the best way to describe this, we don't solve cases, we provide leads to law enforcement.
Exactly. There you go. There you go.
But I got to tell you, our medical examiner, who had no clue who this woman was that died in the hospital, was thrilled, to suddenly know that we narrowed it down to a family. And this is kind of like with Tina, with Virginia last month, I had narrowed it down to a set of sisters and I was like, it looked like all of them were alive. And I was like, this guy had to have another child because I know it's in this family. And so we were kind of stumped, and we were reaching out to law enforcement to try to find them. And they were in various different states. And so I said, hey, let's throw that on Facebook. You want to throw it on Facebook? How do you feel about that? And he was like, go for it. Anything.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Yeah. And then, the daughter saw her mom's picture on Facebook and called us. So
wow.
That's
wow. So what was that like? So she is just cruising through Facebook, or was she actually looking in groups about missing people, or?
They had been looking for her for over 40 years. I don't know exactly what led to it. I think maybe it was one of the grandchildren. I think it was somebody younger in the family that saw it and showed it to her or something, and they recognized her photograph because we had an intake photo for her, an actual photograph of her. And of course, they immediately recognized their mom. So, but what we did is we did targeted Facebook ads all over North Carolina. And so people in North Carolina were the ones that were seeing this. Right. And we had hundreds of shares, I'm sharing to this county, I'm sharing to that county. Right. And it was amazing. And we would have definitely found her, but it would have taken us another 2 or 3 weeks. So because we were just going to throw it out there to see what happened, we saved 2 or 3 weeks of this family still not knowing, where she was. So I love working with people that let us think outside the box.
Yeah. Is there an update on this one that you're working for down in Williamsburg County? Has that one been solved? I haven't seen where that one's been solved. The African American.
Oh yeah, no, it's in Georgetown County.
Georgetown County. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. No, oh my gosh, that case. Oh my gosh.
I know I've shared it several times on Facebook. Yeah. So
thank you for that. I appreciate it. No, we have. That's a really interesting case. One of the problems we faced in that one is that he had been in the water for a really long time. And the grad student doing the DNA did a really good job of extracting DNA, but we weren't completely sure that the DNA profile was robust enough. When we uploaded it to Family Tree DNA, we had almost no matches, and I've never seen that. And so they decided to go back and sequence some more DNA. Again, like I said, sometimes you have to add more until you get a really good profile. So we've paused that for a little while, but we've got like 2,500 people in the tree. We've got 200 or 300 people that have written in to participate. We've DNA tested several dozen. The crazy thing is I bought all the ancestry tests on Amazon. How many times have y'all ever had an ancestry DNA kit rejected?
Never.
Yeah,
I have heard others. I've heard others, but I've never had one rejected.
I've done hundreds of them in the last, 5 years. I've never had one rejected. And we had 11 out of 13 of the first batch that we sent in rejected. And I finally wrote them. I said, look, there is something going on with these boxes. Maybe they sat in the warehouse too long. I don't know what, but you need to replace them. So we got a bunch of, we need kits and had to send them back out. It's just dealing with a huge project like this where you're having to pull people from the public in.
Yes.
It's just, it's a huge undertaking. We've got 4 people working on it. So
I was just wondering if the International African American Museum might be able to help when it opens in a week or so.
where is that going to be?
It's in Charleston.
Wow.
Yeah, it's in Charleston. And so if they could put up flyers, information, can you help? Do you know anything about that family? Because they're going to have many, many, many people. We tried to get in on the first day on the Tuesday and couldn't get in until Thursday. I mean, they're going to have many, many people coming to that museum, and they might. Too bad Shelley didn't join us tonight because she's working with that. So that might be
that's a great idea.
that might be a place.
We're supposed to get a new DNA profile on him in the next few weeks, and so
Okay.
we're hoping that's going to lead us to some more matches. And
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of target testing, and then once we find somebody that matches, we go and get all their relatives to test. And so it's
Yes.
slow, methodical work, but and it
Yes.
may take us a few more months or
Yeah.
weeks, but
It's that information that's got to get out for people to go, oh, I have people from that area. And,
we
maybe
had
we
3
should
different
try.
people that came to us that said, I had somebody in my family that went missing, as a young man.
Yes.
We've tested those people. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get there. We'll say his name again someday.
Yes, we'll say his
Yeah.
name again someday. I love that. I love that. What?
So I have
Go
a
ahead.
question
Go ahead.
about that. Like, I know that when law enforcement approaches people about getting DNA, I know people are always kind of nervous about, okay, what's going to happen? Are they more comfortable when it's a company like yours, and instead of giving you their DNA, they're going through a company like Ancestry, where does that little one-step removal make it easier to get people to? You're shaking your head no.
No, actually, that's a really good question. And that's one of the things that breaks my heart about this case is, there is a good reason for African-American people in this country not to trust, law enforcement, or not to trust DNA or things that they don't really go seeking. When I call somebody and talk to them about the DNA, and it's an instant thing, they either immediately want to help, or they're like, this is a scam. This is, thing,
I do repatriation work for the Army. So same thing, same thing.
Yeah. And, I've got actually, we have a set of siblings in New York that are related to him, but we don't know how, because they just won't give us their DNA. We know that, one of their younger people in their family matched. And so we went back like 2 generations or 3 generations. And, I'm just like, ugh. But, you can't, if somebody just doesn't feel it, they can't, they don't feel it. And we will continue to find the people that are excited about helping us, and they tell their friends and they tell their cousins, and, we'll find them.
Exactly.
I think the more that this becomes more of part of our fabric, I think it'll help, because in a similar parallel way, archivists have the same issue, and understandably, but we have the same issue. I work in a very small archive in Middle Tennessee, and I have a very difficult time with getting the African American community to share their records. I mean, not necessarily donate them, but we encourage people, because we have digitization equipment. So please bring it in. Let us digitize your photographs, your history, your documents. We'll hand them right back to you. It's difficult to get them to come in, because there's just an underlying distrust there. Like I said, understandable. But we are actually doing, our local historical society is working on a World War II project that we're going to do in August. And believe it or not, we've had some African Americans come in with some of their information. And so I think, and I'm constantly out there, in our community, teaching and talking and getting with the members of the African American community. And so I'm hoping that eventually it'll get better.
Well, what I've learned about trauma is that everybody processes trauma at their own pace. And that community has had so much trauma to deal with. And so I can't imagine or even pretend to put myself in their place. And so like I said, I find the kids that are testing, that are excited, and we have found quite a few elders that are very interested in it too. But if they're not interested in it and already doing it, then they probably aren't going to participate. That's what I've found, is we found some elders that have like tested everybody in their family. They're trying to trace Y-DNA lines, and they've been great help. But the people that don't trust it, there's not much I can say that's going to make them trust it, you know. So
exactly. Now, speaking about trust and the way that we, the community, can help, talk to us about opting in on some of these sites. I know that that's something that gets argumented one side or the other, whether people want to opt in for government, for the police departments to use their DNA. Talk to us a few minutes about that, because I know that's one way when we do our DNA, we can help.
Well, it's such a simple thing. You know, if you test on 23andMe or Ancestry or MyHeritage, all you have to do is just download your data and put it into GEDmatch. It takes about 30 seconds. It takes about 15 seconds to ask Ancestry to email you your data. And it takes another 15 or 20 seconds to go set up an account on GEDmatch with your email, and you hit upload, and that's it. And the big thing is to check the box that says opt in, that says yes, you know. And again, whether they do that or not, being in GEDmatch will help adopted people. It will help unidentified remains cases, you know, Jane and John Doe's, but it might not help, you know, close a murder case or an assault that has been needing to be solved for years. And I'm not really sure why some people don't want to do it, but if you understand how it works, there's not really any risk to yourself.
Right.
Some centimorgans. All you're sharing is a level of relatedness between you and whatever sample they put in. That's all they see. They can't see your DNA. They can't copy your DNA. They can't download your DNA. They're just going to see whether you're related to the sample that they're looking at. And so we encourage people to learn what they can about it, so they understand, you know, what they're doing when they opt in.
And education is the best thing, you know, educate yourself and make that decision, not based on rumors, not based on, well, did you watch that TV show where they went in and they, you know, caught somebody that wasn't really guilty because of their DNA and they messed it all up. I mean, you hear things like that. And so I think it makes people a little bit nervous to opt in. And it's a lack of education, I believe, on a lot of people's parts. So
and there are some people that are very educated about it, that there's just a distrust of what's eventually going to be done with that data. Not so much about what law enforcement is doing. I think, you know, health insurance and, you know, all things down the line. But it's definitely something. Cheri and Melissa know this. My niece's boyfriend is one of these people that got a phone call from his sister first, and she said, police want to talk to us. Apparently we're related to a murderer. And it was an uncle. And
an uncle. That's close.
Yes. And so and so it was a very disconcerting phone call, he said. Like, you know, he didn't know, you know, it took him a while to figure out exactly who it was based on where the crime had occurred and, you know, how big the family was and stuff. But it's a very disconcerting phone call. But he was actually happy to have helped.
Yeah.
It came about it the other way, because I think his sister is the one that had tested. But she didn't know enough about the family. So they went to talk to her brother and stuff. But he just said, you know, there was a few days there where he's like, a murderer in my family.
That'd be
like a drunkard, I would have believed. A thief. He's like, but
not a murderer. Oh goodness. And I think that's what people's big fears are, that suddenly somebody's going to knock on their door and they're going to be accused of something they didn't do, and they're going to claim it was the DNA. Maybe the DNA was not right. I think people just get that stuck in their heads. So
I don't really understand that, because I've never, ever in all the years since DNA has even been in existence, I've never heard of a case like that. DNA has exonerated
yes
people.
Never
falsely accused anybody. You know, if they put it up and you don't match, you don't match.
It's just fear. It's just people's fears. I really do believe it's people's fears. And I believe that, like Laura was saying, that people are not trusting what else that DNA is going to be used for if they stick it up on one of these sites. And I think that's been a problem in the past. So but what your work that you do is absolutely amazing. And it's one of those things that who knew, that we'd be able to start identifying people through DNA. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
my obsession with this was a thing 20, 25
Yeah.
years ago, and I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning in my pajamas. Like, who knew?
who knew?
I mean, we
Absolutely.
did the same thing, but for the police. Yeah.
Exactly. So
But I mean, I have a good friend who's a cold case detective, and I know that even though it's not good news, giving that closure, that, I guess it's not really even closure, that's probably a bad word, but giving their brains a rest from that constant wondering, what happened?
Mhm.
What?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And, that's one of the things that I want to say, it wasn't the first, but it was maybe the third or fourth notification that I made when I called the Klauses, and when I talked to Dean's sister that first time, right after she was shocked and asked me about the baby, she stopped for about 10 seconds and took a deep breath. And then she said, "You have no idea what a blessing this is." She said, "I have been praying that my mother would find out what happened to my brother before she died." She's in her 80s,
Yeah.
Oh,
and she was almost like joyful about it. Like, I can't believe we finally know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a blessing to be able to do that for people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so
I'm
much.
glad you could come on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so happy that you could. Is there any last minute things that you would like to say to encourage people to either help with the DNA testing or to help with your fundraising? Get some last words in about
Well,
that.
Yeah, if you Google Genealogy for Justice, or I think you're going to put the link up.
I'm gonna put the link.
Yeah, we have this platform. We've got several cases on there. Pick the one that follow your heart. Pick the one that speaks to you, or give us a general donation to the Dean and Tina Memorial Fund. And right now, for another week, you can be a part of the contest with Nathan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We could have a GenFriends team.
We should. He would tell us we were disqualified somewhere. And
I don't think he would do that. He's a pretty nice guy.
No, he knows us well. That's
He's
why
been on a couple, 2-3 times.
He would tell us we were disqualified for some reason or another.
I
Almost
Allison,
overruled him.
have a picture from Roots Tech where I think it was with Elizabeth O'Neill and his partner Robert. So first we had a picture taken with Nathan, and then we like, "Nathan, can you take a picture of us with Robert?" And he went and he took a picture. So like his face is front and center of the picture, and in the background is Robert with Elizabeth.
So funny.
I want to see
He
that.
is constantly pulling pranks.
Yes.
He's a wonderful person, but he is a prankster.
Yeah, we love him. We love him. So he'd probably say, "Nope, we're not doing anything, but I'm not doing anything with it."
Or he would take the name we suggested and spell it wrong.
Or refuse to pay us to come see him, or like he did at Ristec. Anyway, never mind. That's another story. But yeah, this is so excited. I'm excited that you have this going with Nathan, because I think that's going to help bring in a lot of money. I think that's a wonderful partnership to be able to do that. That's fabulous.
Laura.
That's all, Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Hey.
There's another lady that's a a forensic genealogy author that asked if she sent me an email to ask if I'd review her book. I haven't read it, but I'll let you hit her up too.
There you go. There you go. There you go. That would be great. Well, it was nice to have you on. It was nice to meet you and talk to you. I know we've met, I think at Rootstack or something years ago, but it's so good to have you on to talk about this. You're doing marvelous work, wonderful, wonderful, life-changing work. And we're just so thrilled at the success. And we're waiting to see what more you do and how many other networks pull you in and have interviews and talk to you about your success stories. So we wish you well with all these fundraisers, and we would ask everybody who watches and subscribes to GenFriends, take a look at that. that page and do what you can. Do what you can to help. Donate what you can to help these people come home. They'll be identified and be able to come home and help give their family members that peace of mind of at least knowing what happened to them. So we are so grateful you were here. And we're going to have to get an update when this contest is over and let everybody know what happened. That's a wonderful thing that you're doing there. And then any other ones that you start, let us know and we'll promote those too. So
that's a great idea. I'll definitely keep you guys posted.
yeah, please do. Thank you again. We appreciate you having here. And GenFriends people, don't let us down. Click on that link and get in there and start donating. And if any of you get on there and win with Nathan, we want to know that you won with Nathan. And we want you to come on and talk to us about that. That would be really fun. So anyway, yeah, that would be really funny. Anyway, anybody else have any last minute words before we say goodbye?
Nope, we're good.
All righty. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.